Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. A late night showdown Thursday in the Texas House killed off hundreds of bills. Dozens more went down on Friday, including several that were easily expected to pass. We're talking about things like money for school lunches and legislation to help reduce the number of women who died during childbirth. The drama started Thursday afternoon as the House faced a midnight deadline to push bills through. A group of 12 conservative Republicans who call themselves the Freedom Caucus announced plans to block hundreds of bills. The reason? Retaliation. They said it's because House leaders shut down bills backed by the Freedom Caucus, like strict restrictions on abortion and school choice measures.
We've learned time and time again that when a bully punches you again and again and again, you can walk away, you can be kind, but sometimes you got to punch back.
They punched back with a series of procedural moves that slowed the pace of debate as the clock ticked toward midnight. It worked. The House had 21 pages of bills on the agenda. They got less than a third of the way through before the clock ran out. Some people got angry, others got emotional. Representative Drew Springer from Munster made a tearful personal privilege speech to convince lawmakers to take up a bill on experimental stem cell treatments. He talked about how his wife cannot walk and how this legislation could help others like her.
I pray to God every time I go to Mass, every time I close my eyes, that one day my wife, and not for my sake, but for her sake, I have the chance to have that opportunity again, to be able to walk, to be able to come down. So members, please, if you can find it in your heart, I would appreciate it if we could move a little bit forward tonight. Thank you.
Well, Springer's plea worked. House members approved the bill with minutes to spare, but time ran out for most of the bills. There's still a lot of work to do. House members have another week to consider the Senate bills, and the Senate still has up until the end of the session to vote on their bills. For perspective, we're joined live this morning by State Senator Kirk Watson. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So with tension rising in the House, it seemed like a little bit of a different atmosphere. What did you think how things went down on Thursday and Friday?
Well, obviously it's disappointing to be this close to the end of the session, have a lot of important bills that we need to get to and that need to have full debate, and then to have a roadblock. Hopefully we'll come back tomorrow and things will move more efficiently.
One of the bills that you have been working on is how to actually protect college students from sexual assault. Right. How's that going right now?
Well, it's going very well. I've passed several bills out of the Senate related to trying to change the culture on college campuses. Two of those bills are out of the House Higher Education Committee. I expect them to be on the calendar shortly. Tomorrow in the Senate Higher Education Committee meeting, we will take up HB 16, which is a bill I've been working throughout the session with the chair of the House Higher Education Committee. That is more of an omnibus bill. It has several of the bills aspects of the bills that I've passed on the Senate side in it. We've been working very closely together on that, and I imagine it'll get a favorable review in the Senate committee tomorrow.
With that sexual assault protection bill, yeah, I know you went to Baylor. How did that really affect because of things that have happened at that university in recent months? Well,
there's no question that Baylor has highlighted a problem we have on our college campuses, and no question I've been extremely disappointed in my school. Part of the reason we've been trying to look at this is to make sure that we empower survivors and we make sure that we're putting things in place so that the culture on these college campuses can change in a positive way.
School choice is back. You know, the House said no to it so far, but it's back in the Senate. What's going on there?
Well, you know, I was very pleased when we came in that the House looked like it was going to actually take up and address school finance in a way that we need to. When that bill came over, I was hopeful that we would look at that in a way that we wouldn't try to change it or corrupt it in a way by going to what you refer to as school choice, but what it boils down to is vouchers. At a time when I think that the state is failing our public school system in terms of its finance and taking advantage, frankly, of local property taxpayers. It bothers me that the Senate committee then turned around and tried to put so-called school choice or vouchers onto a public education finance bill that we really need to be focusing on.
Also, the House this week approved a bill that would kind of make it easier when it comes to religion and adoption. And a lot of people say that that might be singling out some people that could be potential parents.
Yeah, I'm very opposed to the bill. You know, I'm all for protecting the religious freedom of anybody. But when we're talking about foster children, we're talking about children that, through no choice of their own and no fault of their own, they need help. And we ought to be focusing on the children and what their needs are, as opposed to focusing on volunteer foster parents and what their needs might be.
You've also been working on legislation to make it easier for Texans to get access to public records.
Yes.
What's that about? I mean, what inspired that?
Well, what inspired it was two things. One is the Texas Supreme Court issued a couple of decisions that just blew gaping holes in our Public Information Act and created exceptions to when people are, taxpayers and Texans are able to get public information they're entitled to. The other thing was that we've had a work group that's been working since the last legislative session on other ways that we might improve the Public Information Act and give greater access to public information to the public. I had filed bills on that. We passed 3 bills overwhelmingly in the Senate, sent it over to the House, and they started dying in committee. Chairman Hunter, Todd Hunter, also had some bills over on the House that were dying in that same committee. So this past week, I worked with my Senate colleagues and I put 6 different bills onto one bill from the House that was already over, and we sent it back. We have sent over a very strong Public Information Act bill. Be great for Texans. It passed on a 30-to-1 vote, and now I'm hoping that the House will pass that bill.
One thing a lot of people are talking about this past week is the Sandra Bland Act. The Senate passed it out unanimously, but it was kind of a stripped-down version of it. Tell me about that.
Well, Dean Whitmire carried that bill, and like any pieces of legislation, or like a lot of pieces of legislation, the legislation, in order to get votes and steer it through the process, sometimes compromises are made. The Senate felt very strongly about the good work that the dean had done on that bill, and so it passed unanimously. Some people are critical of that, but in the process, you don't always get what you might want.
Sandra Bland's family has come out and spoken about, and they're critical about those things that were stripped out.
Yeah, well, and I understand that and appreciate what they're saying. It's the process. Nothing probably would have passed had he not followed the process that he followed.
And how is the House going to receive that?
We'll have to see.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us. I appreciate it. Good luck with the last couple of weeks of the session.
Just 2 more weeks from tomorrow.
Maybe a special
let us hope. Let's not talk that way on a Sunday and Mother's Day.
Right. All right. Thank you very much,
Senator.
Thank you. All right. Stall tactics in the House shut down a lot of legislation, but did the move also open the door to a special session, as we were just joking about? We'll put that question to our roundtable coming up.
Who on this body does not believe in the science of vaccines?
Plus, how a debate over foster care reforms turned into a battle over vaccination. That's up next when State of Texas continues. Governor Abbott signs the bill to ban sanctuary jurisdictions into law. Vaccines take center stage in the House debate over foster care reforms. And some Texans in Washington weigh in on President Trump's firing of the FBI director. Alana Rocha with our coverage partner, the Texas Tribune, takes a look back at a busy week in Texas politics.
We begin Roundup here on Facebook, where Governor Greg Abbott started the week. Abbott signed the Sanctuary Cities bill into law Sunday night alone, without the press or the bill's authors. An Abbott spokesman said they opted to sign Senate Bill 4 into law on Facebook to maximize the audience. Abbott's become more vocal in this final month of the Texas legislature, admitting this week that he urged pastors to pressure House lawmakers to pass some form of the bathroom bill that would require people use the bathrooms in government buildings, public schools, and universities that correspond to the sex listed on their birth certificate. Speaker Joe Strauss has said such a measure would hurt the Texas economy. In passing a bill to improve the state's Child Protective Services Agency, a heated debate over vaccines emerged.
Who on this body does not believe in the science of vaccines and doesn't understand your herd immunity?
And
wants to risk not only their children, but other people's children.
State Representative Sarah Davis attempted to pass an amendment that would have required kids in CPS custody who undergo a medical exam get the HPV vaccine, which has been shown to prevent cervical cancer. Davis filed the measure in response to another amendment that ultimately passed by Representative Bill Zedler that would prevent new foster children from being vaccinated except for the tetanus shot. The two senators from Texas say President Donald Trump was well within his authority to fire now former FBI Director James Comey. Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee and will play key roles in choosing Comey's successor. In remarks to reporters, Cornyn said the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 elections would go on despite Comey's termination. I'm Alana Rocha. The Texas legislature is up against some key deadlines. We have the latest coverage online at texastribune.org.
Thanks, Alana. Senator Cornyn is reportedly on a short list of contenders to succeed fired FBI Director James Comey. Sources told NBC News that Cornyn was one of 7 candidates interviewed for the job on Saturday. But Senator Cornyn says he's happy with his current job. In a statement, he told us his focus remains on serving 28 million Texans in the United States Senate. If Senator Cornyn gets the FBI job, it could have a big political impact close to home. Up next, we'll get some perspective from our roundtable on what could happen in the Lone Star State. We showed you how things got tense during a bill-killing spree in the Texas House, but could that tension push forward controversial measures like the bathroom bill or school choice? We'll take a closer look with our roundtable next on State of Texas. We told you earlier about the standoff in the Texas House that killed off hundreds of bills. Some folks are calling it the Mother's Day Massacre. Whatever you call it, it's raising tensions at a critical time for the Texas legislature. For perspective, we turn to our roundtable. Patrick Svitek reports on the legislature for the Texas Tribune, and John Moritz covers Texas politics for the USA Today network. Welcome, both of you.
Morning. Good to see you.
So first off, what happened? That bill-killing spree, that was pretty intense, right?
It was, but it's not unprecedented. Almost any given session, you might see that. 10 years ago, we saw a huge walkout over protestations of then Speaker Craddock's tenure. They wanted to change in speakership, couldn't get it, so they all walked out, endangered a bunch of bills. 20 years before that, Arlene Wohlgemuth, a North Texas representative, killed an entire calendar with 1 point of order. Found a flaw in the procedure, a whole day's worth of work down the drain.
Wow. 12 members of the legislature, though, out of 150, the Freedom Caucus, that's a lot of power, it seems like, that they wield.
Yeah, I mean, I think while taken together, these maneuvers were entirely unusual. It definitely shows that the influence of this small group of conservative lawmakers, at least in terms of procedurally disrupting things. They did not necessarily walk away from this with many immediate policy victories, which is, I think, their ultimate goal or ultimate stated goal. So that remains to be seen, but at least in terms of being able to disrupt things from a procedural standpoint, they certainly, I think, left their mark.
Could that type of tension move forward, controversial things like school choice or even the bathroom bill?
Well, I think it does give the Senate a little bit of an advantage because one of the bills that died was a sunset bill, and it's got to come back to life in the Senate if it's going to live at all. And that's kind of like one of those must-pass bills. So it gives the Senate a little bit more leverage. Like, we'll pass that bill, but we'd like to see some of our bills and positions move forward as well.
Yeah, I agree. That could increase the leverage for Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who some of his priorities have remained stalled in the House, and so you could maybe see that leading to some creative maneuvers to get those priorities kind of back on the table in the end of session here.
And I was joking with the senator earlier about a possibility of a special session for some of those things like that, but it's really not a joking matter. It could happen, right?
It could, but I think it's all about the budget. Really, that's the one bill that they have to pass. Everything else, maybe they'll pass, maybe they won't. But they don't pass a budget. We're going to spend a little time in the summer here.
I agree. It's fun to think about a special session over some of these hot button issues like the bathroom bill or school choice. But I think it all comes down to the budget, and that would be the key driver of a special session.
Another big story is Senator Cornyn and the rumors that he might be up for FBI chief, right? What are you hearing with that one?
Mostly what I'm hearing is if it happens, what happens here in Austin. That gives the governor an opportunity to king-make the next United States senator. Everybody who looks in the mirror first thing in the morning sees a senator on the other side is going to be knocking on his door.
And it would lead to a special election for that Senate seat in the near future. I believe as early as the November election. And so Governor Abbott would have to pick someone who could turn around and start running for a full term again.
Well, let's talk about the Sanctuary Cities bill. This has been one that has been coming up in several sessions in the past, and now it's finally signed into law. What's going to happen now?
There will be a race to the courtroom, I would imagine, from interest groups that would find themselves harmed in their view by this bill. And lawyers are going to make a little bit of money on that. Ken Paxton's already taken it to court preemptively to try to say it's legal, leave us alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the near term it's going to be all about the courts. There's already been one lawsuit filed against, at least one, by LULAC, and as John mentioned, Attorney General Ken Paxton has already filed this kind of preemptive strike to at least get a the Western District Court to declare it constitutional. And so I think that's the immediate kind of near-term impact. It doesn't go into effect until September 1st. And
he signed the bill on Facebook Live. That's pretty hip, right?
It's something he's going to do again, so he says, and it takes guys like you and us out of the picture. There's not a give and take scrum afterwards, which traditionally we have seen when big piece of legislation. It also takes the opportunity for a victory lap by the lawmakers who worked on this. They don't get that handshake, that photo opportunity to carry back home to their constituents who've been pushing it.
Yeah, and he also avoided having to hold a public event where protesters could interrupt it and kind of dominate the story. That could have been the headline out of the public event, just given especially how much contention this bill has generated, especially as it worked its way through the House.
But on the flip side, many people might argue it let more people see the signing, right?
Sure.
It does, just because he did it on Facebook doesn't mean if he would have done it the more traditional way, he still could have put that on Facebook and just as many folks would have.
That's right. You can Facebook Live a public event or a press conference at any time you want.
But it worked to the governor's advantage. They were creative about it, and they're
I
they're
thought
quite pleased
politically it was smart. I mean, I don't think there was much peril in it politically.
You probably got a lot more followers. Yes.
Exactly.
So one thing that happened this past week in the Senate was something about blue jeans. Want to talk to me about that one, John?
Well, it's the Senate is a very staid body, and I've been covering it for a while, upward of 20 years or so. And this session, they just got it in their heads that they're going to strictly enforce a whole lot of rules, including whether the reporters, I guess, or any visitors can wear denim blue on the Senate floor, and the answer is no. And we were all warned that we'd be tossed out if we did.
Well, that's bad news for you, right?
Well, I've got blue jeans, but I've also got some presentable clothing as well.
He's wearing khakis today. All right. Any last thoughts on these couple of last weeks in the session?
No, it's an all-out sprint, and it's going to be fascinating to see how some of these hot-button issues culminate.
And you?
It's always a race to the finish. There's always going to be more bills dead than alive. There's going to be things that people can take home and say they're proud of. And there's also things that say, well, by God, if you send me back one more time, I'll get it past then.
Well, thank you both for being with us, waking up on Sunday morning for the live show. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Have fun in the last couple of weeks of the session. And state lawmakers respond to cases of Texas police officers shot and killed in the line of duty. We'll look ahead at a special investigative report making its debut this week on KXAN. This week, our investigative team is bringing you a 3-night event called Fallen. It focuses on Texas peace officers shot and killed in the line of duty and how state lawmakers are responding to those deaths.
Hey, over here now, move!
Do you think that there's more of a focus on police protection this session because we've had so many law enforcement deaths in the last year?
Absolutely. One of the unfortunate things in the legislature is that sometimes it takes a crisis to really elevate an issue to where it needs to be.
How do we ensure that we're not just throwing our law enforcement into a scenario that's potentially very dangerous without the proper training.
The majority of officers don't have that kind of training. Why do you think that is?
We need to empower our locals to expand their training, helping them if we can in any way, shape, or form, developing a way to keep that training up to date.
I hear you saying you're all right, man, but just the fact that you got the gun here and you put it in your mouth a couple times, man, I think we both really think you need some help.
Police agencies like the Austin Police Department, they already require their new cadets to have 40 hours of mental health training. So that's what this legislation would do for all cadets across Texas.
That's correct. All of them would be 40 hours, which is the standard training, and that 40 hours would be part of the T-Cole training.
We found there are a lot of challenges to requiring that additional training, challenges only highlighted as we speak with the families and colleagues of these fallen peace officers. Join us Tuesday night at 10 for part 1 of Fallen, only on KXAN. Well, before we wrap up this Mother's Day morning, we want to show you one moment from the Texas Senate. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick shared some personal thoughts at the end of Thursday's session. He spoke after a closing prayer honoring Mother's Day.
For those of you who still have your moms with you, as you know, my mom passed away at 90 in November, so this will be my first Mother's Day without her. So be sure, if your moms are still with you and your dads, to take that moment to cherish those moments. They do not last forever. Even 90 years goes quickly.
When the Senate adjourns each day, it's common to close with a ceremonial honor for a particular person. On Thursday, the Senate adjourned in honor of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's mom, Jean. And I want to wish my mom a happy Mother's Day today. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.